Every urban planner has a way of seeing the city, and so does every street photographer. Some see opportunity, others see constraint. For me, it's always been rhythm, how people move, how buildings breathe, how light travels across facades, which made street photography the space where I could let that curiosity wander. As an urban planner, I spend my days studying systems, land use, transit, policy. But when I walk through the city as an urbanist and photographer, those systems dissolve into moments. I'm really excited about today's video because I get to nerd out about two things that I really care about and I'm deeply passionate about, which is street photography and urban planning. Urban planning being what I studied in school and my career essentially, and street photography being the art form and style of photography which I've leaned a lot towards over the last few years. And somehow me as an urbanist and a photographer, how I kind of navigate both worlds and how I kind of intersect both worlds as well, and how those two worlds also influence how I show up creatively, but also how I show up in my career as well. So I went to school for urban planning here in Toronto, and I can definitely recall that being a really monumental time in my life, just understanding more about city building and build form, understanding how people influence spaces, but also understanding how architecture, the build form, and these decisions that happen in urban planning, design architecture, how that influences human behavior as well. This is also the same time where I was also deepening my interest in photography. And I remember just racking my brain trying to see, like, how can I make these two worlds that are so meaningful to me, but also is essentially how I see the world, how do those two things come together? Urban planning is the process of designing and managing how cities, towns, and communities grow and function. It shapes everything from where we live and work to how we move, connect, and experience public spaces. At its core, it's about balancing social, environmental, and economic needs, creating places that are livable, equitable, and resilient. In other words, urban planning isn't just about buildings and roads. It's about people, movement, and the stories that unfold within a city's design. Urban planning teaches you to think in layers: policy, infrastructure, community. But what happens on the ground is where the real stories live. Jane Jacobs called it eyes on the street, that everyday choreography that gives a city its soul. And it's that life between the lines of a plan that my camera is drawn to. Street photography is the art of capturing candid moments in public spaces. Everyday life, fleeting gestures, and unscripted interactions that reveal the spirit of a place. It's both observational and intuitive, turning ordinary streets into narratives of community, rhythm, and emotion. While it documents the physical city, it also reflects how people inhabit it, the human layer that brings planning, architecture, and space to life. My background in planning taught me to notice how space breathes, the dialogue between buildings, the flow of people, the quiet geometry of a corner. In street photography, I followed those same cues, tracing how the city reveals itself through presence and movement. Planning trained my eyes to read space, to notice rhythm, proportion, and alignment. The same instincts that help me evaluate a streetscape, balance, scale, and hierarchy, also guide how I frame a photograph. In one of my urban design courses, I first came across the idea of the flâneur, a French word that means to stroll or to wander. The term was popularized by the poet Charles Baudelaire, who described the flâneur as a curious observer of modern life, someone who walks through the city with no destination, finding poetry in the everyday. What always stood out to me was that the flâneur learns by moving, by noticing, and by paying attention to what most people overlook. In many ways, street photography is my version of flâneurie, wandering through the city without a fixed purpose, just observing. Planning taught me to analyze the city from above, through maps, policies, and diagrams, but photography forces me to study it from the ground, from the cracks in the sidewalk, the gestures, the light. The flâneur taught me to slow down, to see the beauty and tension in ordinary moments, to wander as a way of knowing. It's where my planner's discipline meets my photographer's intuition. Around the same time I learned about the Flaneur, I was also reading Jane Jacobs, the writer and activist who reshaped how we think about cities. Jane Jacobs was an urban thinker and writer best known for her 1961 book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. She challenged top-down city planning and argued that vibrant urban life comes from the ground up, from people, diversity, and everyday life. Her idea of eyes on the street described how the natural presence of residents, shopkeepers, and passerbys creates safety, community, and vitality in neighborhoods, showing that cities thrive when people are present, engaged, and watching over their own streets. This idea changed how I look at my own work. When I photograph, I'm drawn to those small social interactions, the gestures that keep a neighborhood alive. My camera observes the everyday, the unremarkable moments that define city life. I'm drawn to how people occupy space, how movement and habit give a city its character. The city isn't just designed, it's experienced in passing. Cities are living things, always shifting, always unfinished. In Toronto, that rhythm feels constant. Facades disappear overnight, and the city remakes itself before you even realize its change. Photography becomes a kind of preservation, a record of what stood before policy, progress, and profit moved in. Cities are always rewriting themselves. I just try and keep up with the edits. Working in urban planning, I'm part of that transformation. My job involves the same processes I later photograph: land use, redevelopment, density, and progress. It's a strange duality to participate in shaping the city while also documenting what those decisions leave behind. There's a complicated tension between participation and observation, between being part of the machinery that builds and the artist who stands outside it, watching. Photography helps me hold space for both truths, the optimism of planning and the intimacy of witnessing. Each photograph becomes a kind of reconciliation between my professional distance and my personal empathy. It's my way of seeing. I see what we're building, but I also see what we're losing. Cities have to evolve, they're meant to, but progress isn't only what we create next, it's also about what we choose to remember. Maybe that's why I photograph the city the way I do, with both affection and critique, because sometimes to love a place you have to see it clearly. Planning gave me the framework to understand how cities evolve. Photography gave me a discovery, a way to see beyond the blueprint. In both worlds, I'm searching for the same thing: connection between people and place, between order and chaos, and between what's designed and what simply happens. When I look through my viewfinder, I'm not just capturing light, I'm tracing the human story that runs through every block, every plan, every frame. Planning taught me to understand space, and photography taught me how to feel it. Somewhere between those two, I found my way of seeing: a planner's eye, a flaneur's heart, and a city that's always teaching me how to look again.